Okay, let's go ahead and keep going, rolling through this material and trying to figure out things. So notice now we are going to be graphing an inequality. So I want to kind of point out some of the things as we start going through it. Notice that we've been doing an equal sign, we've been doing other things that we go through, but now instead of doing an equals, we're going to look at whether it's less than or equal to, and so on. And again, trying to determine some important things. So we want to figure out the translation, want to figure out the domain and range, and be able to kind of go from there. So always to figure out the domain, we're going to look at what's inside of the square root or root or radical, whichever way that you want to think about it. And we're going to do x minus 1 has to be greater than or equal to 0, which I have written down over here. And we're going to add 1 to both sides. So we get x is greater than or equal to 1. So that's our domain. Okay, our range is going to really have to do with this number right here and whether it's positive or negative in this particular case. But you'll notice that it says y is less than or equal to. So we're trying to figure out where the values are in the y, and we can kind of get a general idea of all this translation. So we're going to kind of go through the translation before we hit the range. So the domain was pretty straightforward, but the translate's going to be a little different. So we know that the original function looks something like this. It starts off at 0, 0. It goes up to 1, 1. It goes up to 4, 2. And it looks like a parabola that kind of does something like that. That would be the original equation. So now when we're looking at this translation, we can see that everything shifts up 4. So one, draw a few more. So one, so here we have, sorry, I want to use the arrow. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this point shifts up here. So we're going to go up a little bit higher. And then we've got the 1 here. And then we've got like that 4, 2 point actually moves up there. So it kind of shifts up to this point and it looks like that. So that's going to be this translation. Now, this 3 means, so this is the first part of the translation. The 3 means that everything moves up 3 faster. So this point will always just move up exactly the way that it needs to. Now this one, you'll notice goes up 1. We're going to multiply that by 3. So that point actually should have shifted up 1, 2, 3. So it should have shifted up to there. And then this point is, you notice it shifted up 2 from the original, so it's going to shift up 6 on the other one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's going to shift up there, so it's going to shift way up here. So you can see that our new function actually shifts like that. Okay, so that's how I can tell the exact drawing of what this does. Now, I don't need to worry about that with the range or anything else. Because it's still going up towards infinity, but you'll notice that the starting point has to do really with this particular value. So on my range, in this particular case, you can see that, and since y has to be below this particular function, we can see that it's going to be shaded right down here. So what does that mean? Is that my y values, because it is less than or equal to, is going to run from negative infinity all the way up to positive infinity. Okay. And on my x values, you can see x is greater than or equal to 1. Oh, and I should have shifted this over by 1 this way because of this. But it shouldn't matter for the range, but for the domain, it's x is greater than or equal to 1. Or you can think of it as 1 is less than or equal to x, which is less than infinity, because that's what the domain is doing. But we can kind of see what the graph looks like, and notice that I forgot to do the shift on the domain. So this should, every point should shift to the right by 1, because notice that our function starts at 1. Okay, so that's kind of a general graph. Now what's important is that we go back and we take a look at that on Desmos, and so we kind of see what's going on Desmos to see what's happening. And I want you to get used to using this because I think it's really important for you to be able to type things in, be able to understand them, and see what you did. Notice in my case, at least, just by realizing what happened, I could see that things kind of kind of shifted a little bit. Oops, I thought that was the wrong way. Let's kind of go back and notice that what did it do? It moved up 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it moved over 1, which it did, right? Which is what we said it would do. And notice it's going up 3 times faster, so we can kind of see what's happening here. Now notice I put an equal sign here. And now what I want to do is I want to put a less than. And you'll see kind of how things going. And I think it's a less than or equal to, but if I'm not mistaken, yeah. So since it's a less than or equal to in this particular case, we're going to put an equal sign there. So notice that it's a solid line and it's everything shaded below it. So that should make sense because y is less than, so it's below that particular one. Okay, so that's how you start kind of getting used to those types of translations. Okay, so on your homework, you're going to be doing this one. Y is greater than the square root of x plus 6. We're going to pretend for just a second that this is an equal sign so that we're kind of dealing with it, but we want to look at the shifts first before we do the domain and range, which I kind of did backwards. So what does it do? Does it shift up at all? And that would be no. So its starting point is at 0 for the y. Okay, does it shift to the right or to the left? Notice that because this is positive, remember that on the inside it shifts the opposite direction, so that would shift to the left 6 points. Okay, so we have a general idea of what it does there. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a sketch and kind of have a general understanding. And notice I wrote this down to make it a little bit more clear. It doesn't shift up or down. So here's the center point. So notice it doesn't shift up or down, but it does shift to the left 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's going to shift over to here. And notice there is no number in front. It's not negative, so it's going to be above the axes, or it's going to go up instead of going down. And so my first point would be 1, 1. My second point would be, well, that's not really 1, 1, but I go over 1, 2, 3, 4, and then up 2. How do I know those numbers there? Because 2 squared is 4. Notice here, 1 squared is 1, and 2 squared is 4. And then we'd have 3 squared is 9 way over here, and so on. But we can kind of figure it out because remember, this is a square root function. So it's kind of the opposite or the inverse of a squared function. So it's going to look something like that. Now, it says y is greater than that, so it's going to be up here. And then we know that it is going to be a dashed line. And how do I know that's going to be a dashed line there? I know it's going to be a dashed line because it does not have an equal sign there. So it's actually pretty straightforward to go ahead and draw this out. It's going to look something like that. Okay, be sure to ask questions about that as we kind of go through it. And next thing that we're going to do on the next video is we're going to go through cube roots.